So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the AVPN webinar on selecting high-impact NGOs. My name is Patty, and I am the Membership Services Manager at the Asian Venture Philanthropy Network. With us today is Nicola Crosta, Executive Vice President of the EPIC Foundation, who will be sharing with us their experience selecting their global portfolio of 20 organizations from a pool of 1,400 applications from 85 different countries. We also have David Shoemaker from Long Tapang, one of the grantees who recently participated in EPIC Foundation's selection process and will give us his view and experience as an applicant. And last but not least, we have with us Batil Misika, acting head of the Policy Dialogues Division of the OECD Development Center. Batil will provide some comparative perspectives on the NGO selection process in the philanthropic sector. So I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome our members to the session, and for others, a short introduction about AVPN. We are a membership-based organization headquartered in Singapore, working to promote venture philanthropy principles and methodologies in Asia. If you would like to engage with us, please find out more at our website at www.avpn.asia or contact me at patty@avpn.asia. And so without further ado, I will now hand over the presentation to Nicola.
So thank you very much again, Patty, and thank you to all of you online. So the question we're discussing today is obviously a complex one. So how do we identify high-impact organizations? How do we distinguish a good NGO from a less good NGO? This is of course a complex question. I would like to contribute to this discussion basically by sharing the experience during the last couple of years in designing and implementing for the first time, we're now in the second time, of a pretty ambitious selection methodology that, as Patty said, we have applied globally to our effort to put together a portfolio of high-impact organizations. So let me jump straight into this. Before, a couple of words on the context and our understanding of the philanthropic industry, because it does inform the way we shape our methodology. I would argue that the philanthropic industry is characterized by a pretty clear, pretty evident market failure. So on the one hand, we all know that there is a growing actually supply of philanthropic capital from donors that are looking for good organizations to support. On the other hand, there is also a growing number of NGOs and social enterprises around the world that are looking for capital, and we know that this connection is not really working. So donors have a hard time to find good organizations, and good organizations have a hard time to find financing. So that's a market failure that, in our understanding, is largely determined by the lack of appropriate instruments that could help make this connection between supply and demand for philanthropic capital. Now, it's this understanding of the market that has led us to develop what we call an EPIC toolkit that has three elements that we believe are important to make that connection. They have to do with the selection of social organizations, the monitoring of the impact of philanthropic investments, and the way these philanthropic investments can also be experienced. So these are three ways to connect donors with social organizations. Today we focus on the first one, so on the selection toolkit that we have developed. So I'm going to do two things here over the next basically 15 minutes. I will present the defining characteristics of our selection methodology first, so I'll use 6 or 7 slides to do that, and then there will be a final slide where with the team we try to summarize what we believe are the main takeaways that we would like to share from this experience. And so let me recall, this is all based on basically the last couple of years of work. It all started basically when we decided to put together a portfolio of high-impact organizations supporting children and youth globally. So we launched this process. We did it once. Now we are doing this process for the second time. We just started a few weeks ago, so we are already refining the methodology. But so let me present to you what we have used during this first year. So the pillars, the defining characteristics of this selection methodology are basically those that you see in the headline of this slide. So we had in front of us the question, that is, what should we look at when we are looking at applications, at NGOs and social enterprises? How do we frame our analysis? The way we have decided to do it was by first structuring our analysis around 3 areas, and then go deeper into that analysis through by looking at 15 factors, and I will get to that. And these 15 factors were analyzed across 3 stages of due diligence. So what are the 3 areas? Well, broadly speaking, this is what you see in this slide. We look at 3 things. So first, and this is what we call impact. This is the part of the analysis that is basically about the what. So what an organization does, how is that articulated? The second area of analysis of focus for us are operations. So here the focus is on the how. So how is the NGO, for instance, organized? And the last of the 3 areas is what we call leadership. It's basically about the who. So in that sphere, the focus is on people, is who is leading the organization, and basically, so this is the who of the organizations. But let me move to the next slide, where you can see more clearly how we structure the analysis within these 3 areas. So as you can see, for each of the 3 areas, we have identified 5 factors. So the analysis covers all of them. So to make an example, and of course here we don't really have the time to go through them one by one. For instance, in the first set of factors under impact, if I take, for instance, the one that is called strategy, well, that part of the analysis is this part where we have we look closely basically at what the organization wants to achieve and how that is articulated exactly from the vision and mission down to the strategy of the organization, the strategic plan, the programmatic areas, the specific projects, and the activities. So for instance, that is the part where not only we want to know in broad terms what an organization wants to do, but we really try to understand how that translates into a strategy from the macro to the micro level. In the second set of factors that go under the label of operations are, well, that's a different type of analysis. That's the part of the analysis where, in a way, we put aside what exactly the organization wants to do. Our focus is really on the organization itself. We try to organize to determine how robust it is. So we look at financing, we look at efficiency. As you can see, we look at the third one, big part of the analysis, and I'll go back to that point. We look at how the monitoring and evaluation systems, so how the capacity of the organization to monitor its impact. We look at IT systems, we look at digital strategy. So for instance, by digital strategy, we mean, for instance, the web presence of the organization, the use of social media, etc., etc. So all aspects that are very important and very useful to tell us how well or not the NGO or the social enterprise is organized in terms of its operations. Then lastly, in the third category, the one that goes under leadership, as I was saying, here the focus is really on people. And what we do there is basically try to understand who is behind this organization, who leads it. And we really go with our analysis all the way from the founder to the board members, to the CEO, senior management, the team, the social workers. So we really try to understand as much as we can who are these people, the level of skills, motivation, the way they work together. So we look, for instance, HR aspects, internal policies, and not only we do a sort of an internal analysis of the organization from this people's point of view, but we also look, and here I'm thinking of the last criteria you see on that list, the partnerships. We also try to understand how these people interact with their peers in the territory, with the significant counterparts, with their beneficiaries. So these are our 15 criteria that really provide the framework for our analysis. Now, moving on to the description of the different stages of due diligence that we have. As I mentioned, the idea behind our methodology is that we follow those 15 factors. Those really give us the framework for the analysis, and we do so across 3 stages of due diligence. So the factors remain the same. What changes is the level of depth of our analysis and the way we organize a discussion around those factors. So let me describe briefly how these 3 stages of due diligence work. The whole process lasts basically 6 months, and it's 2 months per stage. Stage 1, and here I'm referring in particular to the way we ran it during 2015. So in stage 1, it started in January. We received, it's an online application. It all starts with an online application. We received 1,400 applications from over 80 countries, and basically basically online is the word to describe it. The organization apply on the web. The online application is designed to be as simple as possible for them. So we've been very mindful in managing the trade-off between the information that we wanted and the time that the organization need to complete these web forms that we have used. So used a lot of multiple choices. We didn't ask the organization to prepare any documents for us. They were asked to upload existing documents. So really trying to make it easy for them and to minimize the time that we were asking to them. All this information was captured by our CRM system, in our case Salesforce, which of course allows for an analysis via algorithm rankings, the use of filters, and then of course it allows our staff to have a systematic review of all these applications we received. As a result of stage 1 due diligence, 100 organizations were moved to stage 2. So as you can tell, there's already pretty competitive, there's already quite a big filter that happens between stage 1 and stage 2. So about 100 organizations moved to stage 2. Stage 2 is where the due diligence start to get really deeper and deeper. So as I mentioned, the 15 factors, the 15 aspects that we looked at remain the same, but the analysis gets deeper. And also what characterizes this stage 2 is that this is when we start getting directly in touch with the organization. So there is a dialogue that takes place, phone interviews, Skype, when possible, meetings. So deeper due diligence and an initial interaction with the organizations. This phase also lasts 2 months. Then we move to the stage 3 of our due diligence, and basically half of the organization made it to the stage 3. So we found, to be precise, we found ourselves with 52 organizations in stage 3, and basically this is when we got on the road. And these were May and June last year. As you can all imagine, this was also a pretty incredible, even from a personal point of view, experience. I visited with my team 52 organizations around the globe, met incredible people, and basically there is, of course, a methodology as to that guide us in how to best use these visits to organizations. That, you know, if I can roughly summarize it, these visits are made basically of 3 parts. One is meetings with the organization. One is visits to the projects to try and visualize and understand better interaction with beneficiaries. And the third aspect is the interaction with local partners or stakeholders or basically other people or organizations that can give us an external perspective on the organization that we're trying to understand. So once we basically complete these 3 stages, the result is what you can see. So we found ourselves basically with 15 factors analyzed across 3 stages, which basically gave us 45 data points, so everything gets scored through the process. So it basically put us in the position where with the team we could have a fairly, I believe, fairly objective and also quite quantitative amount of information that is represented by the 45 data points, but also, and what I would like to really stress here, yes, on the one side we've been very systematic with the scoring of all these data points, but that is the basis for a qualitative evaluation. That is the basis also to use the kind of intuition and the findings that come out, especially in the stage 3 when we are face to face with the organizations, with their beneficiaries, etc. So let's say that the result of the 45 data points plus a more qualitative, holistic evaluation of the organization puts us in the position to basically produce three outputs that you can see in the second part, in the lower part of this slide. There are basically, well, first and foremost, it produced the 20 selected organizations that became part of our portfolio. But I like to stress that that's just the first of 3 important outputs. Secondly, the group of organizations, particularly those that were part of the 52 finalists, is a very, very important group for us. So the non-selected organizations are organizations with which we keep a very close relationship. We gave them feedback on our analysis, and we also are working to give them access to a number of pro bono partners that can also help them to address some weaknesses. And then last but certainly not least in importance, the enormous amount of information that we have gathered through this process that is captured by a CRM system provides a pretty impressive basis for us to share trends in the sector that we will, by the way, do very soon with a research product that will come up. That will come out in a couple of months, which, by the way, we will launch also at the AVPN conference this year. What have we learned from these? And again, I would like to stress that a lot of time, resources, both financial and human, and expertise have gone into designing this, into studying what were existing selection methodologies available today, developing our new one. It is important to stress that we have run it entirely only for 1 year. We're now in 2nd year, so our learning curve is still very steep, but we do feel that we already have some takeaways, some lessons learned to share. So I have summarized those in 5 points that I would like to share with you. The first point is about collaboration. Well, you know that we, as was mentioned at the beginning, we made a very ambitious choice to go global from year 1. So to go and look for organizations wherever they were, which obviously took us to geographies we didn't know very well. So this was possible only because of the great collaboration that we had with a list of approximately 100 partners today. These are local partners that have a knowledge of the context in which these organizations work that we obviously don't have. And I have to say that it was quite a powerful combination to see what happens when you come from the outside. So you have the advantages of standard methodology, also a certain distance from these NGOs that I believe can be quite healthy when you are in the process of selecting, but at the same time matching these with the intelligence and the knowledge that is at the local level. That's a powerful power of collaboration really that we have seen at work. The second point is about the approach here, and we realize how important it is to really not focus exclusively, as it is often the case, on a few criteria to analyze organizations. I mean, all of these organizations we realize they do different things in different places. they are difficult to understand. So it is very important to have a holistic approach and try to basically put together as many different aspects and as many different expertise and pieces of analysis together to get a good sense. And so an holistic approach to the analysis we felt was very important. The third point that I would like to raise here to share with you has to do with monitoring and evaluation. So I very often in the last few months, colleagues ask me, what was the most important criteria? Many NGOs also ask me, what was the most important of those 15 to determine your choice? And of course, for us, they are all important. They are not scored in a different way. But what I think was interesting to observe, and again, our research will provide a lot of data on these, is that de facto the monitoring indicator, the monitoring discussion ended up being a key differentiator in our analysis. Why so? Well, simply because we realized that it was monitoring evaluation was an extremely weak point for most of the organizations that we have analyzed around the world, and it was a very strong point for very few. So that I think is an interesting fact to observe, but what I wanted to note here that I've also added under this point is that part of these, it can be easily explained as a lack or of professionalism or skills on the part of NGOs, but it was very interesting to see how NGOs seem to be to be puzzled in terms of what donors really want them to do in terms of monitoring and evaluation. But that was certainly an aspect that was very important in the discussions with the NGOs. The fourth point is this is what we call within our team the communications trap. And it's actually a double trap in which I think that many of us can fall very easily. On the one hand, it was very clear during the process that it's easy to fall into the trap of selecting organizations that have a strong communications, but then when we really dig underneath that, we realize they have very weak programs. And in a way, it confirmed the importance of having a very robust selection methodology, because we did face many cases where at a first glance and because of the power of strong communication, we felt we were really in the presence of incredibly impactful organizations, but then better analysis revealed that it was not the case. But also vice versa, we have seen the risk, and we certainly did in some instances the mistake of wrongly eliminating from the selection process NGOs that perhaps had very strong programs that were doing a good job, but that had difficulties explaining it, so very weak communication. So communication trap is really a big, I think, trap for whoever wants to do this kind of selection. The last point that I wanted to share with you is about technology. This was really quite a remarkable experience. I mean, thanks also, I have to say, thanks to the contribution of colleagues that have a very different background than mine, and sort of very multidisciplinary team that we have, we decided from the beginning to try and make the most of technology for every aspect of the selection process, which is also what we're doing today with the monitoring of these organizations. And I can testify to the fact that there is a number of things that really were remarkable because of technology, and at least three that I would like to focus on here. First, it's evident, I believe, that we could only review and manage such a large volume of applications coming in globally because of technology and of CRM systems. Secondly, I believe, and here I'm referring particularly to the way we structure online applications and the exchange of information using online tools with NGOs, it made the process extremely efficient, certainly on our side, very efficient, but I hope and also I believe pretty efficient for the organizations that were applying. And last but not least, again, I have to say that today we are amazed by the gold mine of information on which we're sitting. And we had basically 1,400 organizations that all of them answered questions that we felt are very interesting. They shared with us what they think are the major challenges that NGOs face today, how they manage their organizations, their board, their finances, their fundraising, where the innovations are, and it's fascinating to see what kind of trends are emerging in the sector. And as I mentioned, we will definitely share this with the sector. So to close here, I would like to sum up basically the 3 points that I have discussed in this brief presentation. So first, as I mentioned, we're definitely convinced that the philanthropy industry needs tools that are more robust, more sophisticated, and that can help and that can support a better allocation of philanthropic resources. Secondly, I've done my best to present to you at least the most defining characteristics of the toolkit that EPIC has put together on a selection methodology. And third, and I would like to conclude by saying that we're very glad to share all of these with you, and we're really looking forward to hear from those that are doing similar efforts so that we can improve what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. I would like to invite David to just quickly talk about his experience going through the process. Hi, David. David?
Okay, thanks for the introduction, Patty. I hope everyone can hear me okay, and hello from Cambodia. I just wanted to thank the APN for inviting us to talk about what it's like for an organization to go through an application process. I think Nicola was very clear when he outlined the three-stage process that the EPIC Foundation used, and I just wanted to share just for a few minutes what it was like for our organization to go through that selection process. We thought stage one, I think Nicola explained that stage one, the EPIC Foundation really wanted it to be not a burden for the applicant. And I think that's what we found out very strongly. It was wonderful and simple and easy to have an online first stage application. Sometimes we're a little hesitant to apply for funding to organizations that we don't know or that we don't have a contact with directly because of the amount of work that goes into it. Most times it's a lot of work goes into it with very little results. So the EPIC Foundation's online application was so simple that it wasn't time consuming for us at all, and it was a great way to go through the first stage. When we made it past stage one and into stage two, it was a little bit more work, but what we appreciated the most was actually the statement in the applications, please do not create any new documents. I'd never seen that in a funding application before, and for an organization that is applying, it was great. Fortunately, Malapchapang, we had already had everything ready to prepare our annual reports, external evaluations, our audit reports, and social media. And it was just a reminder that for organizations that do funding, the preparation of having documents ready to send when someone asks them is critical. And so the second stage for us was quite easy. The phone calls with Nicola during the second stage, just were to shore up what we had sent in and to explain further details. And the last stage was the visit, which is always the most fun for us, to be able to show off what we do. I think when Nicola pointed out that sometimes there's an imbalance between what organizations can show online with their Facebook pages, with their websites, it doesn't always fit with what they're actually doing. And so we at Malapchapang really appreciate when people can actually come to Malapchapang and see what we do. But where we work in Senegal is not always the easiest place to get to. You have to get to Phnom Penh in Cambodia, and then you have to take about a 4-hour bus ride or taxi ride down to where we work. With the EPIC Foundation, there were a lot of emails back and forth before the site visit to make it very clear what they wanted to see and who they wanted to see. They wanted to see our IT people, they wanted to see our M&E staff. So it was very easy for us to organize exactly the people that they wanted to see, and so it was very efficient use of our time, and hopefully it was an efficient use of EPIC Foundation's time. Just overall, to summarize, we thought the application process was straightforward. We thought it was thorough. But as an organization, it was a great way to apply, particularly the first stage with the online application, with having so many just multiple choice questions and not having to write pages and pages of new documents. So for an applicant's background, it was a great process. So thank you to EPIC Foundation, and thank you to AVPN for letting us talk about it. Thanks, Patty.
Yeah, thanks, David. This is, I think, a really useful, insights for the applicants. So I want to invite Batil from the OECD to just share with us, what she's seen and what other foundations are doing in selecting, NGOs. So Batil, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and I'm just gonna
get the PowerPoint up. That would be wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much, first of all, to AVPN for inviting us to join this conversation, and to Nicola and David for their insights. I wanted to, give a perspective of, the context out there for other foundations, and how what EPIC is doing actually comes in at at an important moment. It's extremely timely. And also give perspectives on how it might address some of these market failures that Nicola referred to. So if you move on to the next, I don't know if I have actually, I don't know whether I'm able to move the slides myself, sorry. Okay, so the first issue that you'll find in the global market, for philanthropic support when it comes to NGO or social enterprises, is that there is very little data, and there's a lack of transparency. So as we have seen sorry, to say post 2015 in there, in the 2030 agenda, data is pivotal, because indeed in the Financing for Development conference that took place last July, which led to the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, it was made very clear that philanthropy plays an important part in financing development, but it also contributes in other ways, including being innovative, and but we need to be able to capture this data. Right now, it's not there. There's on both sides. So if you go, let's imagine you go to Cambodia and you want to know what NGOs are out there that you could work with in terms of youth empowerment. Well, that data isn't available from the outset. And if you want to know what other foundations are funding and who they're funding, that is not available either in most countries. So you have a lack of transparency on supply and demand. So philanthropic funders, the Financing for Development, and recipients, they're not making that available. So that is an issue. Sorry, I'm trying to move to the next. Okay, so the qualitative challenge is, as Nicola said, how do you select game-changing partners? This is what every foundation out there is asking themselves. So often you will find, quite a herding movement, whereas foundations that are well known find their partners, through their own due diligence methods, and others will just follow. They will think, oh, well, if the MasterCard Foundation is funding these guys, they must be good. So they won't look beyond the usual suspects. It's not that the usual suspects are not good. It's just that there might be other game changers out there that you need to find. But finding them is extremely complicated. Okay, so, sorry, there's a little lag. So, as I said, due diligence is very costly. So, whether you're an NGO or a social enterprise, for a foundation, it is very hard to find you out there. Yes, communication might be a good way, but, it's as Nicola said, it's not everything. Some might communicate very well, but still they might not be able to track funding for a number of reasons. Then once you've found your game-changing partners, how do you actually track their performance over time? M&E is something else that has monitoring and evaluation that has become critical. Nevertheless, it's also very expensive. The first thing that other foundations ask us when we get into a dialogue is, how are other foundations doing their monitoring and evaluation? How much should we invest into it? Do they outsource it? They are on the lookout for models. Hopefully, maybe at some point, EPIC will be able to share their model whereby foundations are not asked to change their M&E framework entirely, because you can imagine if they have to do that for every funder, it becomes a full-time job. So what are the opportunities for NGOs out there in having organizations like EPIC finance them and engage in such methodology to select high-impact NGOs? Well, that's strengthening the front line, and this is something we've talked about in the post-2015 agenda a lot. SDGs are going to be implemented at the country level, and good performance needs to be strengthened. As I said, again, it's very hard to find them, but once you've found them, it's very important to strengthen them. Then, why would you need to strengthen these frontliners? Because you want them to be sustainable. You want to attract others to be able to have them funded. So you want basically the results of your search for this very good NGO to be able to attract others so that they can in turn contribute to funding them. You also want what this NGO is doing to be scalable, so that you can actually replicate and go to take it to the next level, including through public-private. And then you want to be able to empower the best-in-class NGOs beyond the usual suspects, but I've already mentioned that. So the opportunities for foundations to have, foundations like EPIC selecting high-impact NGOs are quite obvious. They are in need of new tools to optimize their selection and M&E. As I said, it's costly, it's long, and people tend to go to either the ones they know or the ones that others are funding. So we really need some fresh blood and some fresh thinking into that. What David said was very telling. Do not create a new document. So what EPIC and others are doing more and more is to try and avoid creating new burden on frontliners and these organizations that implement, because being good doesn't mean you have all the time in the world, and time is money. So finally, foundations, they need to focus on what they're good at, which is finding what partners they're going to be able to link up with. For example, the private sector and doing telemedicine in remote areas. They need to be able to test new ideas. So if you can lower the transaction costs of due diligence, this is actually a very big step for the game for both foundations and NGOs. So what's needed next? Well, Nicola said it. I think once you have all this data and you have collected all these lessons and you know a lot more about globally these NGOs that are supporting use or any other area, you need to codify that knowledge, because you need to analyze it, because it then becomes a global public good. As we said in the beginning, and Nicola said it as well, it's very hard to know, what's out there. There's a mismatch between supply and demand. There are really good organizations, there are funders willing to fund them, but it's very hard for them to find each other. And people, are going to be very careful about how they allocate funding. So once you're able to actually codify that, it helps the whole sector progress, and it also helps organizations, NGO and foundations alike, improve their game in light of the challenges of the 2030 agenda. So I'll stop here, and I'll be willing to take any questions that participants might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mathilde. We have quite a number of questions, so I think we'll just... So one of the questions is related to the communication trap that Nicola, you mentioned. So one question is related to how you actually got to overcome that. And related to that is how you manage the digital divide in the online application process to really reach organizations that are, working the last mile. So I'll let you respond to that, and then there are quite a number of other questions.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. So let me take quickly these two questions. So the first one on the communication trap, as I mentioned, it really was quite challenging. But of course, to provide a short answer to that, I mentioned there were two cases. One was the case where we were basically fascinated and sold by very effective communications. What we tried to do was really to go beyond that, and to, I would say for me, the name of the game was, let's make the conversation technical, let's go into the details, let's go into examples, let's go into data, let's talk about, and this I'm referring to why the monitoring discussion was so often a differentiator, because we realized that, for instance, organizations that have very strong communications, that perhaps behind that don't have such strong programs, where this weakness comes out is definitely in a discussion on how they basically collect, gather, and use impact data. For instance, when you push that sort of discussion, you can easily get into a field of the discussion where basically, if there is no substance, it's very the organization would find it very hard to have that conversation. And what I found, by the way, very fascinating is that those discussions really pushing it into the impact data, into the monitoring systems, log frames, etc. You can tell that when you have in front of you a very strong organization, you can see almost the pleasure to share that information. You can see that those that are really doing a good job and they know it, they have absolutely no problems to go to those levels of discussions. And conversely, what I found very difficult was that we could see that sometimes we were, when we were checking websites, annual reports, etc. Sometimes you see materials that is not particularly well done, but we try to go beyond that to give a chance, meet the people. Sometimes when we could visit the project, and yes, sometimes you realize that maybe there is a need for an investment in communication, but that the core of the organization is very good and the job is very impactful. So on the digital divide, well, that's definitely a challenge when you decide to go global. We spent months designing the online application, and we tested it in different countries. So basically, this was tested by people around the world that have different levels of expertise, different levels of education, and most importantly, because this was really a big issue, language. Our application is available only in English, and that we are aware there is a barrier for many. But again, we try to make it as simple as possible, and certainly we used a couple of tricks that I think were useful to overcome these divides. For instance, we placed a lot of basically there was the possibility to get explanations of some of the questions we were asking, or for instance, when we were asking for a document, using a terminology that maybe to a native English person would be easier to understand. There were pop-up explanations that would help others to understand. And then another thing we put on that we made available was a 24/7 basically technical assistant service during the selection process. So we basically committed to reply to any question any applicant would have within 24 hours, and we received many. And that was also a way to overcome the digital divide, in the sense that many of the questions we had were actually really like, you know, I lost my password, or I cannot upload this document, or my connection is not good enough, and basically our staff worked to make sure that those problems were solved.
Great, thank you. So another question we have is related to how you selected your local partners, and what is their role in helping you, you know, do some of the, I guess, due diligence process?
Yes. So yes, we as I mentioned, local partners were absolutely crucial and are absolutely crucial to our model, and this is really something that I really want to stress. I don't think that there's any organization really that can claim the ability to go globally, to select organizations and have sufficient knowledge to do so. I think that none of us has this. So the name of the game really is collaboration and partnership. So as I mentioned, we have, to be precise, we have 109 partners today around the world, and they basically the way they help us is threefold, at least threefold. The first is the sourcing aspect. So all of our partners basically receive a message from us when we start the selection process, and we basically ask to them two things. One is simply, can you share with us your favorite organization? Is there any great organization you know in your area that you think we should look at and that we should contact so that they can apply? So this sort of a direct sourcing. And the second one is simply the dissemination of our call for proposal. So they, many partners, and I know some of them online, so I take once more the opportunity to thank them. They were kind enough to share on their social media, for instance, our call for applications. Then the second aspect of the collaboration is during the due diligence. And again, that was critical because basically when we were narrowing our focus on few organizations in given places, the partners we had in those places are partners that we could have a conversation with, and this is again, I believe, good practice among donors in general. And I know this is a common practice, and so we took advantage of that. So simply try to speak with peers, with other organizations that know better the context and they know that have been knowing for some time the NGOs we're looking at, and exchange intelligence and information. And that was very useful during the due diligence. And then let me just mention that, of course, those partnerships remain extremely important for us after the grant-making relationship is established, because, of course, that's when the monitoring kicks in. And again, we don't want to just rely on our own analysis and information during the monitoring phase, but again, we count on our partners to keep exchanging information on the latest about the NGOs we support.
Nicola, the other question we have is actually from a grant-making foundation based in Singapore. So their question is, you know, first they wanted to praise the methodology, EPIC's methodology. And I guess it's a, you know, question to get your advice, because they don't actually travel to the ground. The only contact they have in their evaluation process is, you know, through the reports, emails, and, you know, chat via Skype. And so it's a question on what do you think, how they can improve their evaluation process. And I'm assuming that maybe there's a budget constraint, which leads to one of the other questions that the audience asked about the due diligence process that, you know, you are practicing, you know, is obviously pretty costly. And, you know, so they wanted to know what is this approximate budget for that?
Yes, look, this is obviously a very good question. We all know that, and Batil was also highlighting that doing serious due diligence and serious monitoring costs a lot of money. But what I would argue is that we cannot be shy in investing the money that is necessary to do this. I think that in general what we are observing today in philanthropy, and this is where I was referring to the need for new tools and perhaps for a paradigm shift in terms of how resources are allocated, is that perhaps we are all of us are not spending enough in during the due diligence and the monitoring of the organizations we support. And we realized, and again, it was just the first year of experience for us, that yes, it did cost a lot of money to do this work, but it just pays off. And I am convinced, and I'm also in exchanging with other grant makers, we got to the same conclusion that it really is, it should be seen more as an investment than as a cost, because if you think about it, when you are investing in due diligence, and in particular, I mean, to the specific point of the questions, yes, I do think that going physically to visit the places is crucial for the understanding of what gets supported. But that should not be seen, in my view, as a cost. I am convinced that in the medium long term, it ends up being an investment, because without that kind of investment, the rate of failure is much higher. It's evident. And so at the end, in my view, the cost of not doing that becomes higher than actually the investment in visiting, for instance, organization during the due diligence. The one thing that also, in my view, should be considered is we believe that it's very important to have a multi-year perspective to this, in the sense that it's important to make those investments during due diligence, but it's also important to build a relationship with these organizations and a monitoring system that allows to follow them over time. Because, I mean, to be very frank, I mean, we know that just like in the world of businesses, businesses can be good at some point and less good at another point. And with NGOs, it's very much true. So even an organization that is strong at the moment of selection may be much less so after a year or two because of changes in management or in other circumstances. So we believe those investments are important, should be done, and of course we are aware of the constraints, especially for the family offices, and that's where, in my view, there's perhaps an interesting collaboration that can take place between those entities and either intermediaries like us, because our job is to do that, so we are happy to support in that, and also the local partners that we are using ourselves, and that I'm sure would be happy to support other grant makers around the world.
I have a question for David. So David, you said it was easy, the whole application process. So how long did it take you to fill out the first initial application? And another question is from a grant-making organization asking whether, from a nonprofit's point of view, is it more useful to participate in a award type grant or a program and a multiple year application type grant? David?
Hi, Patty. Sorry, I heard the first question quite clearly. The second one, if you can repeat it, that would be great. But I can answer the first question first. For the stage 1 application of the EPIC Foundations, took about, I remember, it certainly took less than 2 hours. I think it was actually about an hour.
Okay.
Partly because we had documents ready to send, but it took about an hour only.
Okay. So the other question was related about, what were your thoughts in terms of applying for funding? Would you be more interested in sort of an award type funding or more of a program multiple year application?
Well, we're NGOs, so we love any kind of funding. But I think like Nicola was saying, it's wonderful to have partners. Multi-year partners are, of course, the best partners to have, although they may change. I think if you have a multi-year partner, you just develop a really strong relationship together, hopefully. But on the other hand, awards are great too, because that recognition of an award can let other people know that an organization is doing well, at least in someone's eyes. But if I was to say today, I think it would be a program funding. I mean, those are the core costs of what we do and what we need to do. So I hope that answers the question in a roundabout way.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, David. So we are a little bit, already past the time. So I'm going to ask the last question, and I'm going to just email Nicola and the other questions to David or Batil if they're relevant. So the last question is regarding to what kind of support does Epic Foundation provide to those nonprofits that did not actually make it to the end of this 3 stages? Because you mentioned that there's some kind of referrals, or is there a capacity building that you can provide in order for them to, apply again? What do they work on? And also the question about can they apply again?
Yes, thank you, Patty. Yeah, so very quickly on this one, I'm aware of on time. What I mentioned quickly, we really try to give, to remain very closely in touch and to keep supporting the organizations that have not been selected, and particularly we have put in place mechanisms for those that get to the 3rd stage but don't get selected yet, because we are aware that A, they are very good organizations anyway, and B, we have asked at that point quite a bit of their time. And so basically what we do are a couple of things here. So first, we have organized feedback sessions with them. So, as you can imagine, it's quite an investment of time, but I think it was an incredibly useful conversation to have, not always an easy one, but with all of them, we were in touch on the phone, and we basically discussed the reasons why we thought they were not ready to be selected, and that was generally a very positive conversation, and I hope a very useful, certainly for us, but I believe also for them. So organized feedback. And then the other thing that we have partially already put in place, but we're still working on developing it, is a set of pro bono services. So basically this pool of applicants, we put them in touch with organizations with whom Epic Foundation is making agreements that are basically committing to provide pro bono services to these NGOs. And as we know, and this comes out very clearly during this analysis, sometimes organizations are weak in certain areas because they simply lack the resources to improve in those areas. And so we are trying to find those partners that can help them pro bono. So to make an example, the first match that we created was between about 30 NGOs and a network of law firms that is going to help them on for providing legal pro bono services. Another type of support that we're organizing is, for instance, with universities that can help, for instance, to improve a monitoring system and log frames. Another one is for providers of IT services, so for NGOs that, for instance, need a new website or that need to rethink their social media strategy. So again, it's still early days for us, so we are aware that there's many more of those pro bono partners are there, and we're trying to make that connection. And then I believe there was a question on funding also, but I didn't entirely get that.
Oh, that one was, so are they able to reapply?
Yes, absolutely. The organizations are not able only, but they are actually encouraged to reapply, and that's what's happening right now. We are in the 2nd year of the selection process, and actually This is where, of course, as I mentioned, we're trying to improve even more the process. And for instance, one aspect that we have, I believe, improved is that, for instance, those organizations that reapply for the second year, they are able to retrieve, I mean, it's a little thing, but it does save a lot of time to many people. They are able to relog on to our system, and they find, again, preloaded all the information they already shared with us last year. And so they can basically go through the first stage of application by simply basically updating their information, and they don't have to start an application all over again.
Super. Okay, thank you, Nicola. Thank you, David. Thank you, Batil, for this very interesting session. And thank you, everyone else, for your engagement. And we look forward to our next session. And the webinar recording will be posted in the next few days, so please look out for that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.